Allow me first to transport you to around 1997. A Cebu Pacific plane crashes into Cagayan de Oro. Two alternative lawyers, Attorney Gana, Attorney Ollado, die. And when I was asking about people in the movement, I was asking them such tragedy. And they tell me, no, Father, it's okay. They were relieved of the bad news, of sharing the bad news to the Sumilao farmers because at that time, they lost the case. The iconic Sumilao farmers, years after, have decided to walk 1,700 plus kilometers all the way to Manila. When they reached Manila, of course, they couldn't enter the President's Palace. The military was there, the police was there, and the farmers couldn't enter the palace. And they were served burgers. And the youngest of the Sumilao farmer looked at the burger and cried in their language, "Dili burger gianhinamo, yuta, yuta, not burger, our land." They cried. They walked to a university, sought help from the church, the students, the teachers, and all sympathizers, and we went back. And that's the iconic embrace of the Cardinal welcoming the Sumilao farmers in the Ateneo. And this was the first ever mobilization of its kind that crossed Mendiola Bridge, entered the President's Palace, and forced the President to convene the cabinet and to face the farmers. Case resolved. What did we learn from here? That collaboration is powerful, that active nonviolence still works, and most importantly, that programs are needed to sustain the gains. This picture shows you the historic entrance into the land that was deprived of them for several years. It was fenced. It was also in this area where they were actually standing their ground, and that their opponents used animals, cows, carabaos, horses to attack them. And when these animals drew closer, suddenly, just suddenly, it stopped. There was even a picture of a carabao kneeling before the farmer, recognizing them as the real owners of the land. Now they're inside, and here was the very first day they entered that land. Unfortunately, the farmer leader, months after, was murdered. So what are we doing? We're doing a social enterprise for them. Why? Because getting the land back is not sufficient. We need to come up with a program. The last point that we learned is that we need to sustain the gains of agrarian reform. That is a social entrepreneurship that we're starting called Uma Republica. It's a very slow program. There's a lot of complex factors that will have to be considered, but we're getting there. The traditional business would just tackle one P, which is profit. We're now moving into the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet. But what's next? What other P are we adding? That's peace. But what else is ahead for social entrepreneurship? I'd like to present to you the Public-Private Social Entrepreneurship Partnership, or PPSP, Corporate Social Entrepreneurship, Social Technopreneurship, EPS Redefined, and SSS, the sharpened basic elements. Let's go first to the PPSP. We're all familiar with the triple P, the Public-Private Partnership. But you see, while that is a welcome, that is very limited in nature. It focuses on infrastructure. There's no problem with that. But after the bridges, after the roads, what do we have? And we're still lacking in terms of including the base of the pyramid. Because once the public comes up with an agenda of a development for people, the people are actually not consulted. Once private corporations go into outreaches or CSRs, the poor are not consulted. And so for the public and the private, we need the base of the pyramid into the same level as the public and the private, and that we need to consult the social enterprises, which would basically be composed of poor communities. And this is where I'd like to redefine and sharpen the definition of social entrepreneurship. And I'd like to really stress that social entrepreneurship is a community-based social business enterprises. There are so many schools of thought in social entrepreneurship, but I subscribe to the reality that any social enterprises will have to have business, and more strictly and more technically at that, it has to be community-based. That way, we consult the people, they are autonomous, they are consulted, they have a voice in the social enterprise. And I propose the public-private social enterprise partnership as a new model. In fact, right now, this is already being pursued. For example, the Happy Noi, the Filipino chain of stores that got international awards in social enterprises, has partnered with our social welfare department, the public sector, Happy Noi, the social enterprise, and of course, the funders of the microfinance, microventures card would be the private sector. So this is a new model of development. Some British economists would call this the third sector, and that is what we call the public-private social enterprise partnership. We convened some 10 people from the government, cabinet members, USEC, ASEC, 10 social entrepreneurs, 10 people from the corporations, and we decided on the 4 action points. One is to shift paradigms, because some corporations are still thinking traditional corporation, doing corporate social responsibility different from their business. Some foundations are still thinking foundations, when in fact the grants, the pool of grants is really shrinking and shifting towards social entrepreneurship. So we need to shift paradigms. Second, we realized that even if we did put up rags to riches, that Happy Noi is successful, and other social enterprises in the Philippines are actually gaining international recognitions, we realized it's really not just because of one person, but that it was a collaborative project and that we need to synergize. The third, we need to establish more social enterprises, but the more difficult part is that we need to produce more social entrepreneurs. The kind who can actually go around payatas, you know, have the smell of the garbage with their clothes, just take a cab, put some perfume, and then meet the world-class Lea Salonga for an event. We need those kind of social entrepreneurs who can translate the word nanay or mother to the corporation and explain to the corporation what the schedule is of a mother. That we cannot just say, you need to be professional, and at the same time translate the word professional to the worlds of the nanay. Those are the social entrepreneurs that we need. And these are our action points as far as PPSP is concerned. So that's the next phase. The second is corporate social entrepreneurship. Last year, when the Corporate Social Responsibility Expo, the biggest expo of CSR practitioners, happened at SMX, and they invited me to give a talk, I challenged them to evolve the traditional model from CSR into what I call a CSE, the evolved CSR, which is business as unusual. What is CSE? CSE is a response to the critique of the CSR, because even each of the economists had a skeptical look at the corporate social responsibility. For example, you're a computer company and then suddenly you're putting up a school for out-of-school youth, and there's a very little linkage to that. You're an oil company and then you're suddenly doing feeding program. So the CSR is not linked at all to the core business. So what we're proposing is a corporate social entrepreneurship where the core of the business makes a significance. So for if a computer company, maybe the CSR can be about computer literacy. For an oil company, maybe it can be an environmental program. It comes from the core of the business, and that is corporate social entrepreneurship. Why are we pursuing corporate social entrepreneurship? Because even if I'm a priest, I must confess to you that it is not the church, not even government, not even any entity you can think of that can actually change the world. It's business. It's the most potent, most powerful entity right now, because even the government and the church, for that matter, knock on the doors of corporations. So how do we go about this? When I was talking to Paul Herman, a friend of mine, when he released this book, I was saying, this is the kind of measurement that we need to implement to actually actualize corporate social entrepreneurship. Because being a hip investor, you combine human impact and profit, and this is one of their measures, whereby they just do not limit the measurement to profit. They look at products, people, profit, and planet, and it results to good health, good wealth, good earth, good equality, and good trust. We believe what gets measured gets done. So you need to have the right measures. And HIP is just one tool to actually implement corporate social entrepreneurship. The other trend right now, aside from PPSP and corporate social entrepreneurship, is social technopreneurship. Social technopreneurship, and I'd really like to emphasize and include the word social because as you will see right now, there's so much buzz about technopreneurship. I was even consulted about one big competition that's ongoing in the country right now, but it's limited because there is no measurement in terms of social impact. So we really need to include social in terms of technopreneurship or the use of technology in entrepreneurship to help the poor. But you will not be able to include the poor without the word social. There is one competition whereby the products of that competition will just be for the company. And it's such a self-serving competition. What we need is a social impact where we invent, where we come up with products for the good of the poor. And that is called social technopreneurship. The other is EPS. The old model is to measure earnings per share. That's the traditional model of business whereby you divide the profit, compute for it, even include economic value added, and at the end of the day, with that EVA, with that earnings per share, you're able to increase the earnings of the stockholders. That's a very old model. In fact, my message to all business people, even at the CSR Expo, is that if your business is just about profit, it's an old school, obsolete, and we don't need your business. The business that we need right now is the one that is about stakeholders. So a movement from earnings per share to an earnings per stakeholder, believing that high tide raises all boats. But you see, even that model is limited. What happens is that in a stakeholder theory, everyone gets rich. But see, the objective of getting rich becomes an equal momentum for everyone, whether small or big boat. So I still find that a very limited theory. I would like to propose that a new model for measuring good impact, good social impact, is another EPS called earnings per person served. In our last board meeting at Rags to Riches, which happened just a few weeks ago, we hit a wall. What happened was that we had one board member, we're 5 in the board. From the original 10, we decided to cut it down to 5 for faster decision making. We invited someone, a CFA, a certified financial analyst, a change maker, someone who turned around a multi-million loss of a company to a multi-million earnings for that company, a very cutting-edge, sharp chief finance officer of this company. And when we were discussing how to move forward as far as Rags to Riches is concerned, he was concerned that Rags to Riches is earning a lot of value, but we're actually making the corporation rich. And that really disturbed us. That while we want Rags to Riches to earn and really get rich, that is not our primary objective. Our primary objective when we were putting it up is that we want the poor people, primarily in Payatas and now different communities, to actually get rich. But by design, when corporations were invented, anything you do with the corporation increases the value of the corporation. So even if we put up a cooperative for the Payatas women, even if they already have a share, even if they already sit in the board of Rags to Riches, we're still trying to craft a formula on how we can actually prioritize them in terms of earnings. If we just do a foundation and outreach, that will be the typical CSR. If we increase the share, that will then mean diluting the other shares. So what we realize is that there is no book, no theory existing to actually pursue earnings per person served. But that is one thing that we want to cross. That is one thing that we really want to explore, and that is one thing we need to solve in the next board meeting of Rags to Riches. Earnings per person served. Why? Because all the 10 original board members would always ask me about how much is the mother earning, not about how much is my share earning. And so we're so concerned about the poor, and yet in the construct of corporation, there is no formula, not yet, at least now. Finally, and I'd like to end with this, I realized in a social enterprise, you need 3S. One is service. Service to the poor, meaning a social enterprise that does not serve the poor is inauthentic. Social enterprises, I strongly believe, were invented to help the poor or to address a social issue. So the first S is service. But this service, mind you, is a very difficult task. Let us not romanticize the poor. Because the more you baby, the more you romanticize the poor, the more you give disservice to the poor. The more you give a disrespect to the poor. Our quarrel should be their quarrel. Our problem should be their problem. We do not plug them into an extension. We plug them into the main outlet, and that is service. Secondly, strategy. That business acumen is non-negotiable. Otherwise, if you don't have a good businessman in a social enterprise, it will be a typical foundation. You really need to find a good business person into the team. But serving the poor and having a business are two difficult problems. Two stones you hit your head with. And the only way to survive service and strategy is spirituality. Regardless of religion, regardless of tradition, regardless of belief, that one has to believe in something greater, something higher, something nobler, something beyond oneself. That is the only way to survive service and strategy. And spirituality is about finding that North Star, that compass, that fulfillment that we are all being called to. That is Social Entrepreneurship 102, the next phase. And we hope we can journey with you, because anything with a purpose, anything that is greater than us is inspiring. And we hope to journey together towards a better country, a better world. Good morning.